Hello, my Avengers aficionados. It's Jerry Rasco with you. And yes, today we are talking more about the Avengers. Specifically, we're going to be looking at Avengers number 6. So it's an interesting comic for sure. Features some characters that we may or may not have seen in other comics come together for the first time. So that's kind of interesting. And it is something that sort of starts a trend with the Avengers over the years, and obviously we'll get into that as we get into the book. Of course, I always want to thank everybody who has been subscribing and supporting the channel. We are making great strides towards the goal of 1,000 subscribers, and that is all thanks to you. So thanks to everybody who has been supporting the channel, spreading the word, and hitting that subscribe button. If you're new here and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, please consider doing that today. When you click the subscribe button, you are automatically registered to win some free artwork. Potentially win some free artwork. So here's how it works. When we get to 1,000 subscribers, I will be choosing 6 random subscribers, and each of them will win one piece of a one-of-a-kind artwork that I've created to celebrate each of the review series here on the channel. So let me show you, by clicking the subscribe button, what you have a chance to win. First, we have the Amazing Spider-Man, we have the X-Men, we have the Hulk, of course we have the Avengers, and then we have the 2 new series that are debuting very soon. We have Captain America and the Fantastic Four. So again, just by clicking that subscribe button, you are registered to be drawn, to be the chance to be one of those names picked out of the hat at random to win this artwork completely for free. There's no purchase necessary. There's no money involved. Even the shipping to the winners will be free. It's just a matter of clicking that subscribe button. So if you haven't, please consider doing that now. And again, I appreciate it. It helps the channel a great deal and gets us closer to our goal. So thank you all so much. That out of the way, we're going to jump over to the comic and we're going to check this one out. So here we have the cover to the Avengers number 6. If you were here before and you saw my review of Avengers number 7, this does kind of run into some of the same problems that we had with that cover, which is the figures are very, very small. When you have a team book, and I'm speaking from experience, my own self-published comic does feature a superhero team, and so you've got to balance the number of figures across a cover so that everybody is shown, or you've got to highlight very specific characters within that team on the cover, maybe not show everybody. So there is a dance you have to do to get the right composition featuring the whole team, or the highlight between a couple of characters. So it is tough. However, in this case, everybody here, with the exception maybe of Captain America, who's throwing his shield, everybody is sort of in a very static, frozen pose, right? Thor is not actually throwing the hammer. He's winding up. Giant Man is in this weird, open arm, I don't know what he's trying to do, if he's going to try to catch the horse, or I don't know. Of course, we have Rick Jones, who's doing nothing. He's just standing there. Iron Man is at least blasting, but the problem is it's still a very passive pose. He's sort of standing, one hand kind of relaxed, as opposed to really, twisting that body more. There's ways you can show this and have it be even more action-packed. Arguably, the character Baron Zemo is in a pretty good pose. He's got this sort of baton gun thing that is glowing. That's a pretty good pose. But again, when you have 2 teams of superpowered characters facing off, being in a little more action-oriented stuff would be a big help. But it is what it is. So it's just an okay cover. As I always tell you at this point of the game, this is a scanned PDF copy of this comic. Obviously, I do not own a copy of Avengers number 6. Unfortunately, I have not won the lottery. So what we have here are scanned copies that Marvel put together and sold onto DVDs, and those are on the computer, and that's how we're able to share it. And then at the end of the video, it's actually kind of cool because it's a scan. I can capture the image and put it onto my drawing tablet and kind of use a live sort of example of drawing over. So it's something that we wouldn't be able to do if we had the real book. So that's a benefit here. Of course, we do also have all of the original stuff in terms of the ads, the color work, the page turns, all those things. So this is as close as we can get to having our hands on the original copy. Let's talk about the creative team. We have, of course, Stan Lee writing. We have Jack Kirby as the penciler. We have Chic Stone as the inker. And the combination of Jack Kirby and Chic Stone, we have seen them before in the X-Men series that we have. Chic Stone did some inking there. And Chic Stone, so I'm not going to get into the history of his resume. You can check that out on the X-Men series that we have here. But I always found that Jack Kirby, in my opinion, especially as he went through the years, ended up having a more and more sort of angular line work that he used. And Chic Stone has a much softer ink line. The only problem that I have with Chic Stone is that I find his inks to be a little light, or the term I like to use is thin. And what I mean by that is there's sometimes the line itself gets very, very thin. And there's some examples in here of that where foreground, background, it doesn't matter. It's all this sort of very thin, what we call a dead line. There's no variance to the thickness or thinness of the weight. The other part is the shadows. There are very, very little shadows in Chic Stone's work. Now, whether that was him choosing to not add, shadows, heavy shadows to the Jack Kirby work, maybe Jack's pencils were, in this case, at this time, were more open. I've seen, some Jack Kirby pencil work, and certainly there are times when he was, filling in solid black areas, really, taking the side of that pencil and shading it in. So I know that he would have done that. So I don't know if it's the inker's choice to not darken those up or fill those in, or maybe at this time Jack wasn't doing it and Chic Stone just didn't feel comfortable adding them. I don't know the answer to that. But it is shown in the artwork. So when you look at this splash page, for example, it's a very good splash page. However, there are just this sort of hatch mark rendered shadows below the characters and not below every character. Thor he's casting a shadow behind him, but it doesn't touch his feet. Iron Man really isn't casting a shadow. So it's really Thor's cape, I guess, Rick Jones' Cap and Giant Man are sort of casting shadows, and even then they're not dark. And if you look, so if a shadow is below on the ground, that means the light is coming from above. And so somebody like an Iron Man, where he's bent over, his body would be shielding his chest and abdomen area from light, so that should be a core shadow underneath him. Same with the bottom of his legs. Same thing here with Captain America. The underside of this leg should be darker. And then you get Giant Man. This whole shin that's underneath his knee. So the knee would catch the light. Underneath this should be much, much darker. Underneath in his torso should be a lot darker. And we just don't have those shadows. So again, that's one of the things that I often don't like about Chic Stone's work. I think, again, he does add a softness to the Jack Kirby lines that is a nice pairing, but overall, not necessarily my favorite because, again, of the lack of depth and shadow. So, real quick, let's talk very quickly a story recap. So, previously, the Avengers had been to they were out on the West Coast and coming back to New York. So this is right after, obviously, Captain America has joined the team, and then they have their next adventure out in the Southwest with the Lava Men, who are trying to destroy the world with this crazy rock. And so now they're flying back to New York, so they stop midway to refuel. and we're getting a little test of some new technology. Captain America has incorporated magnetics into his glove to help him recall that shield. And so we're going to talk about that here. So in terms of the art of the splash, like I mentioned before, it's very good. There's some very heavy contour lines, which are the outside outlines of the figures. I think that part all works really well. Find it very interesting that the one thing here, Cap's foot would break the panel and have that into the credits here a little bit. It's not necessary. It's just kind of interesting and does, I don't know, it almost looks like an afterthought. Like, oops, I cut his foot off at the toe and it looks like he has a stumpy foot. So why don't I add that little bit over the top? Other than that, like I said, pretty good overall. There is a subtle change to Giant Man's costume. So in the previous issue, these sort of suspenders, I guess, is what I always called them. But these V-shaped black stripes on Giant Man's costume were parallel lines before. And now it's just been simplified down to a black sort of V shape. So let's talk real quick. The magnetics in Captain America's gauntlet and shield, they'll explain it here in the next page or so, but it's obviously something that Captain America does not stick with for very long. The canon thought process is the additional electronics required to make the shield magnetically attracted to the glove, added weight to the shield, and threw off its balance when he was throwing it. Personally, I think part of the reason it doesn't stick around is it sort of diminishes Captain America. The whole concept here is that he has a unique skill set that has only been mastered by a couple of other people. Somebody like a Hawkeye who, has sort of almost supernatural aim in terms of angles. A character like U.S. Agent, aka John Walker, who took over for Captain America at one time. So there's only been a few people who have been able to throw Captain America's shield, have it rebound and reflect and come back to them. So by making it a completely technological purpose, it takes away, again, some of that unique skill that sets Captain America apart. So I think that's part of it. So yeah, there we go. So we're jumping right in, even though it's a quiet moment, we are still jumping into the story. So that part's cool. Here we explain a little bit. So Iron Man has added these transistors in the center of the shield, and that's what connects the two. So he doesn't have to worry about the leather straps anymore. If the shield gets thrown and gets deflected by an enemy, he can call it back to himself. I mean, it makes sense. But at the same time, like I said, I think it takes away from the character itself. So they start looking inside, and you can see the whole shield kind of pops open like I mentioned, a watch, or a makeup compact. So what this tells me is that this is not Captain America's original shield. His original, and in the comics here, so if you're a fan of the movies, his shield is vibranium. Here, his shield is not vibranium. It is a unique adamantium steel alloy that does not exist anywhere else. It's not pure adamantium. And so you couldn't crack it open and put something in the middle of it. That just would not work. So this tells me that's not his original shield. And again, I think that does end up being sort of explained in canon later, but for now it is what it is. It's also interesting that I don't think the magnetic portion, the fact that his shield is magnetic comes back, I don't think it plays a big role in the plot of this either. So it's kind of interesting. They make a big deal and we spend the splash page and another whole page kind of talking about it, but it's not a big deal. You will notice a lot of the discussion of this issue has to do with story elements. Most of the time we're very much focused on the art, and we will talk about that for sure, but there's just so many wacky things with this storyline that it's hard to not talk about them. Good hands here of Giant Man. I do like the big hands, the the very bold outlines are very good. All the wrinkles. So the larger something gets, the more those small details are going to be critical and visible to everybody else, right? Thor. So Cap again is a little bit down in the dumps because he is still mourning the loss of Bucky Barnes. And so Thor and the team is trying to cheer him up by like, look at all the fan mail we've got. And here's my question. So they are not at like headquarters. They're not at Stark Laboratories. They're refueling somewhere in Chicago. Why do they have the mail with them? Did they bring it with them on this trip? Like, what is going on here? That seems a little weird. I do like the posture on Cap as he's sitting in this chair all of a sudden, as he, the head down, hands between his knees, sort of, not beaten, but a man that's kind of, you feel the weight of time on his shoulders, which is nice. And then Rick Jones consoling him is fine. Here's a problem I have with this, however, is this little line. So this is to delineate where the floor meets the wall. And I'm going to zoom in because it's a simple thing and it doesn't work. It's better than not having it and having the characters float in space. But here's the problem. The chair is essentially against the wall. Rick Jones is behind Captain America. His foot is in basically the wall. All you have to do is take this line and move it up to here. And it still gives you the sense of a floor, a wall behind, enough depth to contain both figures. But instead, you've pressed it right up to the bottom to where this doesn't work. You're basically crushing Rick Jones's leg and foot between this chair and the wall because there's no space there. So that does not work for me. One more thing, again, it's interesting. Jack Kirby's Captain America has a very unique look. The way that he does the eye holes in the mask where you cannot see the eyebrows. So it's very heavy lidded. And then this chin is a very Jack Kirby kind of thing. This sort of shadow that he would run down the center of the face, and we see that hint of it here. I guess the idea is to insinuate that the chin, he's got, a bold chin that kind of juts out as opposed to maybe a flatter, weaker chin. That's fine. So it's trying to emphasize that curve, but because it goes too far up, it looks like there would be some sort of, literally like a cleft, not just like a little dimple, but like his chin is like two pieces. So it's one of those things that I'm not a big fan of. It does just become part of Jack Kirby's visual language, and we, you just sort of learn to move on with it, but not my favorite. So now we do change, and actually this scene transition is pretty good. Captain America is talking about the person who caused Bucky's death and finding that person to get his, vengeance. And then we cut to the scene showing, hey, we're going to talk to this guy Zemo, and that is the guy who caused Bucky's death. As well, it's a page turn. So we have a theme transition. We have a page turn transition. Pretty nice stuff. So Zemo has set himself up in the jungle, and the guy who brings him his supplies brings him also news in terms of magazines, newspapers, etc., so he can keep up with what's going on in the world. And he finds out that Captain America is back and has joined the Avengers. And so this drives Baron Zemo into a rage. And he does, for the first time here, mention this thing called Adhesive X. And we'll get into that in a second. So that seems to be his main motivation, is not so much, he's not looking to conquer the world at this point. He's not looking to, he didn't even know about Captain America's return, so he's not looking for revenge. He's looking for a solution to this Adhesive X. So, let's see. So here we get the sort of history of Baron Zemo. So he tells the guy he was a Nazi scientist, and towards the end of the war, Captain America found him, and his whole deal was he was developing this thing called Adhesive X. It is supposed to be some sort of adhesive that is so strong, nothing can break it. Nothing can remove it. There's no like antidote for it or solvent for it. It's just this adhesive. And somehow they were going to turn that into a weapon. So you go like, I don't understand exactly like how do you use adhesive as a weapon in that instance? I mean, we'll see what he does in terms of when he attacks New York starting in the next page. But it just seems a little weird to me. Like that's your giant super plan is I'm going to fly trap everybody down. Okay. And then Captain America, of course, splashes it all over him. And so his hood is glued to his face. And that's his big deal is the hood is glued to his face. He can't get it off. He needs to find a solvent to remove it. And he can't. So this is very silly, obviously. What a weird idea for revenge. What a weird weapon of war is adhesives. Yeah. And then here's another thing. We can see that Baron Zemo has eye holes. At least he can see out of the mask. It then is just sort of shadows where his nose and mouth are. How has he been eating or drinking for the past 20 years? Because it's been about 20 years since the end of World War II and the time of the publishing of this comic. How has he eaten and drank in 20 years if this hood is glued to his head and he can't pull it off? Makes no sense. I did at first, though, of course, I was looking at it from, a modern perspective, and I was like, we understand how Captain America has returned, at his prime from being frozen, from being a World War II veteran to here in 1964, and you go, okay. And of course, every year that goes by, that date sort of ranges, and he's been in ice longer and longer and longer. But it's the super soldier formula combined with the ice has kept him in essentially cryostasis so that when he's thawed out, he hasn't aged. But somebody like a Baron Zemo would have aged. However, it dawned on me that in 1964, it was only 19 years since the end of World War II, which it's hard to put that into perspective, right? For somebody who grew up at a time way, way after World War II, it seemed like that was a million years ago. And so to go, oh no, in 1964, it was less than 20 years from the end of World War II to the publishing of this comic. So in 20 years, could Baron Zemo still be a viable physical threat? Yes, right? We don't know how old he was. He could have been in his 20s. And so maybe he's a man in his late 40s as of the time of the printing of this comic, which is certainly viable. So he's like, all right, so now he's going to get his revenge. He had thought that he had killed Captain America and Bucky, obviously now just Bucky, and so he has to he wants to finish the job and destroy his enemy, Captain America, and so now becomes the beginning of the plot to do that. And again, we cut scenes and on a page turn. Terrific, great choice, and we cut right to the Teen Brigade, which has been doing a lot of heavy lifting in these comics lately. Between the Avengers, we saw them recently in the X-Men a little bit. The Teen Brigade is like a big thing that they really want to shoehorn into these comics. So you have the Avengers, which literally features some of, if not the most powerful characters in the Marvel universe. Thor is a god. Giant Man is very powerful and scientifically advanced. Iron Man, of course, is a walking, armor battalion, basically. And yet they need teenagers to help them save the day over and over. So again, we know that was sort of the motif of the time. A lot of comics featured teen sidekicks, teen helpers. The idea was to put characters into the book that the readers, theoretically a lot of teenage boys reading comics, would have an avatar that they could see themselves at. Realistically, though, I think obviously it fades away. It's not nearly as big a deal anymore. About the only person you see with a real like teenage sidekick a lot is like Batman. The idea I think is more that instead of we have to have an avatar that's just like us to put ourselves into that character, it becomes more wish fulfillment. Like as I was a kid growing up, I didn't want to be Rick Jones. I didn't want to be Robin. I wanted to be Spider-Man. And so even though I knew Spider-Man was way older than I was, you could still imagine what it would be like to be Spider-Man. I didn't want to imagine what it would be like to be Rick Jones palling around with guys. That wasn't it. So anyway, that's just sort of the style of the time, and these guys pop in right away to alert the Avengers to what's going on. These villains are showing up and spraying adhesive all over New York City, and which somehow these boys know just by looking out the window that it is adhesive spray. Who knew? That's crazy. Now, maybe you could go, oh, I see he's spraying the spray and now everybody's stuck, but I don't think we've gotten to that point yet, right? He's spraying around in the air, and then we cut to it here. Maybe that's where you would switch these two, have the Black Knight first, and then the Team Brigade going, oh my gosh, look, he's spraying this foam, and everybody appears to be getting stuck in it. Anyway, just subtle little things that, again, from a writing perspective, and I'm no professional writer. I have written several comics, my own comics, other people's comics. There are little things to help make the plot clearer and more straightforward, and sometimes that doesn't happen here. Sometimes we get a lot of convoluted stuff, and that's kind of what's happening here. So they're trying to, I guess at this point, it's not so much that the adhesive is the plan to like take over New York. I think they're really just doing it just to call out the Avengers so that Baron Zemo can destroy Captain America. So he's enlisted the Black Knight to help. And this is a very good horse, by the way. Animals in general are often hard to draw. The nice thing about horses is, certainly today, and I'm sure back in the day as well, there's a lot of reference that you can use for horses in tons of poses, whether they're leaping, running, standing, laying down, doing tricks, whatever it is. You can find tons of pictures of horses to use as your reference. So you can always get that anatomy right. So that's good. Then we cut to the next guy, who is the Melter. And so the Melter is an Iron Man villain. Specifically, he had technology that would, his weapon can melt all metal, not just iron. So obviously very specific. If your character is just made to melt iron, obviously really designed for Iron Man. This guy has a lot going on. So real quick, let's talk about costume design. And you have some great examples here as kind of opposites. So you have somebody like Iron Man or Captain America. Great. Even Giant Man. All the Avengers costumes right here on the page. Very iconic, very classic costumes. And yes, there are some details of like, so example on Thor, he's got those sort of wrappings on his boots, the number of the circles on his chest, stuff like that, the winged helmet. You have details you have to add, but they're not super crazy, and it has a good profile. If you just draw Thor as a silhouette, that helmet and the cape, and of course the hammer will really help to identify him. Captain America, same thing, the wings on the head, the general cowl, the Buccaneer boots and gloves, and of course just the primary red, white, and blue really makes a statement, and the costume is fairly easy to draw over and over. You can add as much detail as you want with the texture of the sort of chainmail shirt that he has, but overall, it's pretty easy to be consistent with that design. Even Iron Man, again, certainly simplified down a little bit to from where it started, but again, not crazy costume. When you have a character like the Melter, who has weird gloves, striped tights. There are these parallel-ish lines on the shorts, the device on his chest, the weird pattern on the cape, and then this sort of helmet, which is got all kinds of strange angles. It's going to be really hard to draw that consistently over and over and over again. So when you are designing your characters, by all means, take that into consideration. When you draw them one time, you're like, that's cool. And if all you're ever drawing is a pinup or a cover or something like that, it can be super cool. That is 100%. However, if you have to draw this character on 20 pages, you might want to pare it down a little bit. So just an FYI, and this is a really good example of an overly complicated costume compared to more simplistic and, of course, iconic costumes. That's why you've probably never seen this Melter costume before, and you probably will never see it again. So the Avengers charge in, and I've talked about this a few times as well. There are a bunch of small panels on all of these pages. You can see 6, like almost every page is 6, 7. This is 8. Minimal is like, this is lucky, it's 4. More 6, 5, etc., right? So you have lots of panels. When you do that, you're then stuck for space. So when you have this team shot, you want it to be bold, you want it to be big. We have a nice horizontal piece down here. However, that, because it's so short, it leads to cramped poses. Thor flying at the villains, but like an inch off the ground, like he's sliding into home plate here, right? As opposed to being more, maybe more forward, or maybe instead of sort of leaping to crouch in, maybe he would be jumping more upright. If you had more space, you could do that. Captain America here as well. This is incredibly crouched. Yes, he's really leaning forward, and it gives us that drive that he's coming forward really strong. Think about like a football player, like a football running back, when they get the ball and they're running through the line. You really drop that head and shoulder and get low. That makes sense there. Here, Cap could be a little more upright, a little more chest forward. His head would still be in front, but there's enough room here. Even with the dialogue, it's not a big deal. So just something to take into consideration. And then we get the Avengers kind of interacting with this adhesive for the first time. So Giant Man and Cap are the ones who get stuck first. And then they quickly pivot to deal with the Melter. Obviously, Iron Man that's who he's most worried about. If his Iron Man armor is damaged, then his heart will stop. So he's got to get the Melter out of the way real quick, which he does by stunning him. And then this is a nice overhead shot here. So the idea is these guys are stuck to the ground. Let's tear up the ground and take it with us so we can retreat and try to find a way to get you off of this adhesive. So that is a great down shot, overhead looking down. The figures are done perfectly. The Melter, kind of rising up from where he'd been knocked down by Iron Man. Great stuff. So that's a good piece there. And then this is actually really good reaction as the Wasp zips around to distract the Melter. You get these good hand, actions like what, think about if you had a bee suddenly flying in your face, you go, what? So the hand is great. The tilt of the head is good. This is a really nice panel. Good inking. Whole thing is great. And then we go here and you go, what is happening? So it's fine. I don't know why you would need a tow truck. Why couldn't Iron Man just grab the tow truck chains and fly off? Why couldn't Iron Man have lifted the ground, lifted them up, and flown off with them? Right? I mean, there's a lot of things that could have happened instead of stealing a tow truck. That seems a little strange, but okay. But here in the panel, I'm like, this is where my problem is. Your horizon line is very, very high. Your figures down here are very low off the panel. So in essence, it looks like it's a hill. We haven't established that they're on a hill at any point. It seems like a fairly flat kind of New York City street. But because you put the horizon line so high, it works as like a hill. Then here's the other problem. Iron Man is further away. He's closer to the horizon. He's heading away. Why is he bigger than Captain America, who's closer to us? Yes, I understand Captain America should be smaller in scale to Giant Man, but then Iron Man should be even smaller because that's what happens. The things that are further away from us get smaller and smaller. So we have a scale problem here. This makes Captain America, in relationship to Iron Man, seem itty bitty bitty. So that's not great. So very weird kind of sequence here. I told you this is a weird one. Thor realizes what's going on. He's got to help because it's basically time to retreat. And he spins around to free himself from Radioactive Man and the Melter, and then takes off. Real quick, I did want to point this out. I do like how they handle the Radioactive Man. So this is a character who literally is just a guy who walks around and it just emits radiation. He can shoot radiation blasts, but he's just literally just a walking pile of radiation, right? And so I like how Jack Kirby and Chic have shadowed this character. It's a combination of sort of shiny and glowing. Like he's got this sort of internal glow. So it's not so much that his body is showing shadows or, reflections from the outside light. It's showing this from sort of an inside light. And I think that's really, that's nicely done there and really sets the character apart. We see that more here and here. So that part is really good. There is a comment here about this is how Thor takes off when he flies through the air. This is not how Thor takes off. Thor takes his hammer, spins it, throws it, and just holds on to the handle, and the hammer carries him with its momentum. This is just him spinning in place to get them to create space so that he can take off. Subtle thing, but again, I'm nitpicking and I'm a big nerd. And so that's why we're all here, right? So yeah, again, subtle stuff there, but Thor does take off to help clear the way for his fellow Avengers and Iron Man in this tow truck. So Thor takes on the Black Knight, and the Black Knight is not going to be able to stop him. So they bust their way through, and here we go. And this is in my notes. This is one of the prime examples that I had here of what I call Chic Stone's thin inks. So it's really, really clear here in the first panel. Like when you look at, let's zoom in. When you look at the line work on this panel, so much of it, other than maybe like Thor's legs a little bit, is super, super thin. And when your line is the same width all the way, like on this truck, those are what we call dead lines, or, dead weight lines. So they don't have any thickness. There's no variation. The thicker line towards the bottom of the bumper, where obviously there would be a shadow, there's nothing. Let's be honest, there is no ground shadow. There's nothing here. There's no shadow underneath the truck, underneath the ground that Cap and Giant Man are stuck to. They're going, it looks like, under some sort of a tunnel maybe, so there isn't even a shadow there. I mean, it's really thin. There's just nothing to help sell the three-dimensional form. This truck just looks like it is a flat drawing. Yeah, you fill in some black areas, but that's not the same as shading, right? Cut over to the next panel, you see the horse. The horse is much better, even though I would argue these front legs maybe should be, if you've ever seen a horse rear up a little bit, usually those legs aren't stiff. They're going to be bent up a little bit. So that's maybe a bad reference. But you see the shadows in the muscles underneath, shading out the bottom of the legs. That is what you want, essentially, for the truck. And for some reason, they can't do it, and I don't know why. So again, that's just a great example of Chic Stone's what I call thin inks. See it again here as Baron Zemo arrives in this crazy copter thing. Again, all the line weight is exactly the same. There's nothing heavier than anything else, so it doesn't help identify where the light source is. There's no real three-dimensionality to it. It just becomes a very, very flat form. So yeah, that's the page that really stuck out to me the most, as that is some really, really thick, really, really thin lines by Chic Stone. Let's see here. Oh, and then the other thing I said in my notes is this last panel, really poor as far as the ground and the background go. So we know that they're in New York. We know that they've been on the streets. We can see this city is suddenly far away, and they're in this big open yellow space. Is it a park? Is it a street? Is it a top of a building? It's yellow. We have no idea. If it's grass, show me some grass texture. If it's in the street, show me a car overturned. Show me some broken concrete. Show me a curb somewhere. I'm not asking for a ton. I mean, it's just a little bit of detail to help sell us where we are. Instead, we just get this big blank yellow space. So, yes, the key here is the figures, but you can do more to help set them in space and where they are. One other thing I had thought about this actually as I was reading through the issue, and I had to go back to this page to confirm that, like, I was giving somebody the benefit of the doubt, and I was wrong. So as we go, I was like, oh, maybe the benefit of the doubt here is that Zemo's whole plan of spreading this adhesive all over New York City was to call out the Avengers and to get them to show up and to get them to find a solvent that then he could steal to get this hood off of his face. That was the idea. I was like, oh, maybe there's a plan and a plan. Like, so I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. Come back to this page. It's only here. The radioactive man kind of hints like maybe they'll find a solution. And he's like, a solution? I never thought of that. So the whole idea of trapping down New York City was nothing more than the Avengers will show up and then I can kill Captain America. The whole thing. Even though this guy's been in South America for 20 years, there's no real, at this point, I mean, there's revenge. He feels like he wants revenge for his hood being stuck to his head. Kind of did it yourself. I mean, you made the adhesive. You didn't make a solution for it. You never thought it, like, one of your own soldiers might get stuck in it, dummy. So, okay. So yeah, I'd given him the benefit of the doubt, and it did not help. So here we cut to Avengers headquarters. Again, not the greatest transition here. I mean, you could argue they're talking about how to come up with a solution to remove adhesive X, and that's what they're trying to do here. It's kind of thin. Realistically, you could have taken and this, this panel here could have been part of the other page in terms of the dialogue and stuff. We don't really need it. And then you page turn to Avengers Mansion. Could have been done that way. Also interesting. So again, they're like, okay, the only way to get the Avengers, because we don't know where their headquarters is, we're going to have to draw them out again. Like we just did. So I got a plan. Here's what we'll do. We don't know what the plan is yet, but he's going to tell us. Nothing is working. And then the Wasp has an idea. So she goes to the phone and she's aware of a criminal called Paste Pot Pete, who is a Fantastic Four villain. Paste Pot Pete is essentially just like Baron Zemo. He is a guy his whole shtick is creating different adhesives to trap heroes in, and that will allow him to somehow become a master criminal. Obviously, it doesn't work because he was arrested and he was captured by the Fantastic Four, and so now he's in jail. He later changes his name to the Trapster from Paste Pot Pete, which is a better change for sure, but still one of those villains that people just kind of laugh at. However, they offer him a deal. If you can help and you have a chance to help the Avengers, we'll reduce your sentence and you can get out of here sooner. And he's like, okay. So he spills his guts right away. And he's like, oh yeah, of course, I work with adhesives. So I have created a super solvent that will free me from any of my own adhesives, which makes sense. and probably has 20 years of scientific advancement compared to Baron Zemo's. So Baron Zemo is still stuck on the one thing. That's his one. He's a one-trick pony. I've got this adhesive. I created this adhesive in 1945. 20 years later, nope. I'm sticking with it. I'm what's this phrase? I'm going home with the girl I brought to the dance. Right. I think that's it. Something to that effect. Or dance with the one who brought you, or whatever the deal is. This guy is stuck to his motif. He is not changing his game plan one bit. And of course, like I said, there's no problem. 20 years later, yeah, I got a solution for that. So Iron Man flies over and finds Paste Pete where he had stored his solvent, and they bring it back. Now, here's a quick thing. The Wasp is using the phone and has to be like, hey, somebody write this down, because she's so little she can't handle a pencil or a pen. Why aren't you just growing? Just go to normal size to use the phone. Why do you have to be a wasp size to use the phone? Like, okay, I get it. When you go into battle, you're getting ready to fight. Don't be wasp size. She's wasp size the entire issue. Why don't you just go down to normal size? Get up to normal size. You can go back and forth. I don't get it. She's not stuck there. And then, again, I told you a lot of this has to do with story plot items as opposed to art in this issue. Sorry. Iron Man shows up, and he's got this canister strapped to his back. Like, he can't carry it. Iron Man's muscles do nothing. The suit is all the musculature. The suit is doing literally all the heavy lifting. Why would he be tired? Why is he complaining about having, get this thing off me? I lugged it halfway across town. The suit does all the work. It should do nothing. You should just be able to carry it. Tuck it under your arm. Hold it out in both arms. It's not like your shoulder muscles are going to get tired. The suit is doing it. I don't understand. Doesn't make sense. Good overhead shot here showing as they're spraying the solvent and all the adhesive is coming off, and Cap and Giant Man are now free. And then Cap kind of is like, hey, I have an idea. I know what to do. I'm pretty sure he hasn't seen Zemo yet. Zemo has not been exposed as the ringleader of this situation, but Cap is pretty sure that's who it is because he's familiar with Adhesive X. And so he's like, I got an idea. We're going to switch combatants. Everybody, Zemo recruited guys who are, kind of made to take you on. We're going to fight everybody else's enemies. And I got another idea. We're going to engage the Teen Brigade. And again, this is where I'm like, why are the most powerful superheroes in the Marvel Universe relying on teenagers? Crazy. So, we cut back to Zemo. Again, not a great transition. There's no theme. There's no art. There's no page turn. It's just, we've finished on Cap, and now we cut here. Why not just put that on the next page? That's my thought process there. So what they're doing is Zemo's like, it worked once. We'll just do it again. Take your canisters of adhesive and spray the city, and the Avengers will come back. Again, talk about the literal definition of a one-trick pony. Baron Zemo has no originality whatsoever. So they're like, okay. And there we go. They're the masters of evil. They're going to do it. The Teen Brigade shows up. So Captain America has let loose a bunch of teenagers take on what turns out, which we'll find out, to be an armed man, grown man, as well as, theoretically, they could, he's at the ship. The Masters of Evil are still at the ship. They're not like in another location. So they're just kind of on the other side of this ship as the kids are swapping out the adhesive canisters for the solvent canisters. So these guys are going to walk away thinking they've got adhesive. Instead, they've got the solvent. So they're going to spray again, and it's going to free everybody. That's why, right? But again, you have a Nazi war criminal. This guy's a madman. and we'll go, hey, teens, go sneak up, grab the armed pilot. What if it wasn't the pilot who was filling the containers? What if it was the radioactive man? Go grab the radioactive man with your bare hands. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. It's crazy. So they go back to the city and start spraying around, but instead of, very quickly, Black Knight realizes this isn't sticking more people. This is freeing everybody. What is going on? This is very nice. This image is really good. The horse is great. Again, I mentioned reference. I'm sure that this is from a reference, some sort of photo, but very, very good horse. Great shadows. The rider on top is great as well. The body posture and the positioning is very good. The big feathered wings even are a nice addition. I mean, obviously it's a flying horse, so you got to add them, but the way that the different feathers are layered in there is very nice. The background is good in terms of the perspective of the city going back. My only problem, and again, I don't know if this is a Kirby issue, if this is a Chic Stone issue, or a little bit of both, is the lack of shading in that background. It now becomes very, very flat because you have such limited shadows. You have black in the windows, but there's no shading underneath any of the architecture. These overhangs, none of them are shading the building at all. The cars aren't casting shadows. The people aren't casting shadows. Here, so the top of the buildings, people are standing on the top of the building. The ledge is sort of juts out slightly. Underneath those architectural structure pieces, there should be shadow. There is none. So this feels very lush and three-dimensional, and the background becomes very, very flat. You can have both. You don't have to pick just one. When you're drawing your comics, you got a character big in the foreground, shade them. You got the background, shade it. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And Thor arrives. Again, very nice reference on that horse sort of jumping in midair. Really nice. So Black Knight is typically associated at this time with Giant Man. So he's not prepared necessarily for Thor. So he starts trying to use his super technology weapons, his lance, this sort of stun gun, none of which seems to work on Thor. So what does he do? He pulls a 357. My lasers from my lance, they don't work. I hit you point blank in the face with a stun ray. That worked for a second, but whoa, you're recovered really fast. You have a magic hammer. You're the god of thunder. I'm going to pull out a 357. Let's see how that goes. What? I don't. Okay. Good luck with that one. And Thor then presses the attack. We cut to the Radioactive Man, and now he's fighting Giant Man, where Radioactive Man is more of a Thor villain. And he's finding the same thing. Everybody's getting free, so there's no point in using the canister since it's not adhesive, and he realizes that. So he throws it at Giant Man, and Giant Man uses his quick-growing, quick-shrinking ability to trick the Radioactive Man into shooting a blast at what turns out to be Iron Man. And this is a whole thing. So he's got this device that when it detects radiation, that's the word I was looking for, it sends out this lead device that wraps up whatever the radiation source is. So seems a little weird. Like, what if it's that it would, I don't know. It looks like it's designed for a person, obviously, and it's got a string on it so you can attach it to stuff. If you just wanted to smother a radioactive source of energy, you know, obviously it would be like ore, like radioactive ore maybe, or rods or something. Why would you have to have it in this sort of tendril? Why wouldn't it just be more like a blanket? So the logic doesn't make sense there, but it's fine for the story. You could have just said, hey, I whipped this up. He's Tony Stark. He's a genius. I took existing radioactive protocol and I modified it just for you, pal. And then gets him. So Radioactive Man is dealt with. He is all wrapped up. And then the Melter arrives. And again, this is the guy who Iron Man is mostly worried about because he can destroy his armor, which would kill him. But of course, instead of going straight for Iron Man's armor, the Melter tries to encase him in a melted streetlight. I do like the texture of the melted streetlight here. I think that is really good. I think that part really is nice there. Kind of really sells the meltiness of it, but still recognizable enough as like what would have been a lamppost, so that's cool. He also is apparently able to use his melting ray on buildings. Now, he said before he could melt metal, but now seems to keep melting masonry, so maybe he can melt everything? Don't know. Very Jack Kirby rubble here. I talk about that a lot. It just has a very iconic and definitive look. It's angular but organic at the same time. There's always a hard shadow, black shadow on one edge. Just really identifiable. And here we go. Iron Man tricks him into melting a fire hydrant, which shorts out his ray, and we're good to go. So the Melter has been dealt with. So now all that's left is Baron Zemo himself. And we'll see what happens here. So Baron Zemo finally caught on, hey, there's a bunch of kids hanging around my ship. Watch this. I'm going to hypnotize them. And, but again, doesn't really do anything about it. He hypnotizes them, but then he doesn't command them to do anything. They just sort of stand there. And then Cap shows up. And here we go. So this is actually the note I have here. These two pages have really good choreography. So it's very important when you're doing something where you're showing characters in battle, fighting each other, that it makes sense in terms of from panel to panel. So here's the example. Captain America comes forward, kicks this, I guess, scepter is what Zemo calls it, out of his hands. So now it becomes a hand-to-hand fight. And he's kicking with his left leg and his right leg is down. So that way when Zemo counterattacks with a karate chop, looks like he sort of clips Captain America's knee there. It's the right legs. It's the correct legs. His left leg is the one that would have been clipped because it's up in the air. The right leg is down to the ground that he can then jump off of. So that's great. And then again, Zemo is using his right hand again. So he's chopped down, now cross. The bodies are in the right positions for these things to happen. This panel here reminds me actually of much later Kirby. So for me, my first real experience for Kirby was not in the 60s, but in the late 70s. So just for historical purposes, in case you weren't aware, Jack Kirby does leave Marvel Comics at one point, and he goes to DC Comics and does a bunch of work for DC, and then comes back to Marvel later in the 70s. And that, to me, this image really reminds me of where his work goes during that time in terms of when I talk about very angular line work, that's kind of what I'm talking about. And very, very bold, very thick line work as well. So that's what this image reminds me of. But great, Cap is, attacked to the ground. He dodges the blow, but he's able then, because he's on the ground, to double kick and knock Zemo away and then leap after him. Zemo, you can see, is following through with a right hand punch. Cap grabs it and continues to hold that hand as he sort of puts him into it's not quite an arm bar, but some sort of essentially a hold until we get the pilot. So remember I mentioned the teenagers were sent after a fully armed man. We didn't know he was armed, but he's armed, and he takes a pot shot and clips Captain America. It's not fatal, but it's clipped. He gets clipped enough that it knocks him down and gives Zemo a chance to escape. So I mentioned this seems to happen to Cap a lot because when we get to the first issue of his solo series, the same sort of thing happens. He's fighting, and eventually somebody shoots and kind of clips him in the back of the head. So I don't know if this guy has CTE at this point or something, but he seems to be like grazing the head. Bullets graze his head a lot. Let's put it that way. Ant-Man and the Wasp arrive to help, and they do this by putting a nail down the barrel of the gun so that it deflects the bullet. Now, I've seen a lot of stuff about the science of ballistics, so bear with me. That's not how that works. Now, you could use a nail. If you had a big enough nail, you could block and theoretically plug the gun, and it would explode. The bullet might fragment and push both chunks of the bullet and the nail out, and it would be very hard to tell where they would go. That might happen. But it certainly, I don't believe it would just deflect a bullet out of the barrel and take it at an angle. And here's my other thing. Why doesn't... So after he shoots, he fires trying to kill Captain America. The bullet's deflected, and now Giant Man shows up to grab him. Why wouldn't you just go Giant Man to start with and squish the gun? Just crush the gun in your hand, and then he can't fire it. Just throwing that out there. So now the guy goes to run, and Giant Man has to chase. And of course, because he's big, things like buildings are easy for him to jump from building to building. This is a good spot here. The guy's running. He thinks he's escaped. He does not see the giant, literally the giant behind him, crouched between the buildings over the alleyway. That part is really cool. I think that's a great pose and a nice twist as the guy all of a sudden realizes, uh-oh, Giant Man's got him, and when he's got him, he's got him. Great big hands, good figure there. Overall, great stuff. Thor arrives. We can see he has defeated the Black Knight, and he's riding the winged horse. And then Zemo takes off. And here's where we get the old switcheroony. So Cap explains the kids, not only did they switch the canisters so that they were spraying solvent instead of adhesive, there was also this master canister which had X, which Zemo thought would be the solvent that he needed, right? He marked it as X so that he would take it away and be able to get his hood off. However, Cap mentions, we knew that. Somehow we knew that. And the kids swapped his X with the solvent with one that has tear gas. And there we go. Zemo has clearly opened. The ship begins to spiral out of control, and the authorities will be able to get him. So there we go. The threat of Zemo and the Masters of Evil is over for now. However, there's one little bit here that I thought was kind of crazy, and that is Rick Jones asks, "Are you going to keep the Black Knight's horse?" And Thor answers, "I can't. Even though he's a prisoner, it's still his by law." Really? We're worried about personal property for a horse with wings. You're telling me that scientists might not want to study to find out how did you make a horse with wings? Who's going to care for the horse while this guy is in jail doing his time? Somebody has to take care of it. We're just going to let it roam free, apparently? And that's what we're worried about, is personal property law for people who have just tried to destroy New York City, attempted murder, right? They're not playing. They're trying to kill the Avengers, essentially domestic terrorists, and yet what we're worried about is personal property. What? Craziness. Now, I want to talk about, before we wrap this up, I want to talk about this close-up of Captain America, because it stuck out to me like a sore thumb. My first thought was, these eyes are way too big. They are way too large for this head if you were to draw out the head. And so I tried to do this, so bear with me. I'm going to cut to my drawing tablet where I've copied this image so I could do overdrawing over the top of it and kind of show you what I mean through those steps. So let's cut over to the tablet. Okay, so here we go. You can see this is the image, and here's on the drawing tablet. And I've got different layers here to show you what I'm talking about and kind of what my thoughts were. So theoretically, when you draw eyes, there are proportions of the human face that you would go by. And any one thing, you can take the size of a person's eye, the size of their ear, the distance between their nose to mouth, and you can use those one thing to sort of plan out how their whole face should be shaped, because everything is in proportion to each other. And so that's the deal. So what I thought was, are the eyes too big? So the first question was, are the eyes too big? And what I did was I literally cut and, selected out the eye, copied it, and pasted it in the middle to see, would a third eye fit between the two eyes? That's the standard proportion. So when you're drawing your character, you draw their face, you draw one eye, you draw the other. If there's more than enough room for an eye in between, then your eyes are too far apart. If there's not enough, they're too close together or too large. Let's see how things worked here. So there we go. So it pretty much fits. So in terms of being in relation to each other, the eyes at this size are in proportion to each other because we could fit that third eye in terms of space in the middle. So far, that part is good. I think the problem more than anything else is the eyes are too large in relation to the nose, and that's what we're going to show next. So if you were to draw out this figure as it is, this is what it would look like using where the nose of Captain America is now. So you have that nose, you have a little bit of distance between the nose and the top lip. This is where his mouth would be, the bottom lip, and how the mask would come down sort of to the chin. So it would be a much wider face. It wouldn't be as long. The nose and eyes could be in proportion if the face is shorter and wider, which is fine. And you can draw characters like that. It's not the most heroic face shape of all time. So here is what I suggested. So I said, what if you came in and did more like this? So you lengthen that face to give him a bigger chin. Your nose would be longer, the mouth would be lower, and then you'd have the larger chin here. You could even widen out the face a little bit than what I did on this side over here. But I think for me, based on the size of the eyes, this is about where I would have drawn the facial features. Now, you might argue, you could say that maybe this face seems too long, and that in comparison, this other face is better. Personal preference. For me, with my hero characters, I want a bigger chin, bigger jaw. I think that's important. So for me, I would go here and maybe just, again, like I said, widen out that over here just a touch. But in terms of the relationship of where his nose is compared to the size of the eyes, I think this makes more sense to me. So then what I did is I said, okay, if this is the face that I would have drawn, how would that fit in the panel? So what we did is we just did this. So basically, I took the panel, this, and just applied the panel over the top and kind of did a little erasing. So basically what you've got here is you would not see the bottom of his nose through this panel. And now, which is fine, you don't have to. And now the eyes don't feel, it seems like we're really close in on the eyes, but it doesn't feel like they're too large compared to the rest of the face. So again, remember we've got from here to here, right? That's the difference. So to me, that makes sense. This nose feels very, very short, very small, again, based on comparison of the eyes. So real simple thing, but something that's really important. And the emphasis here is when you are drawing a close-up inside of that panel like that, you need to draw, stuff outside the panel to make sure where everything would fit. Even if it's on another piece of paper, you tape a piece of paper over the top, draw the face very, very lightly first, sketch out where the stuff would be, and erase what you don't need. But it's important to draw through the panel borders. Otherwise, you end up like this with a face that seems out of proportion. So that is that. So again, thank you for bearing with me as we did a little bit of live stuff there. And then, of course, that is the end of the book. So that all said, we're going to cut back over to the desk and we're going to wrap this one up. So that's Avengers number 6, a very silly story. It is nice, though, to see the introduction of the Masters of Evil. They do become a much more dangerous and much more interesting set of adversaries for the Avengers. Here, the whole Adhesive X thing is just very silly. But I like the idea of a team of villains bonding together to fight the team of heroes. You know, it's something that works over and over. Even Spider-Man as a solo hero has the Sinister Six. So the villains finally smarten up and go, we can't beat the heroes alone. Why don't we band together? And that's exactly what they do. So I like that part. We'll see the Masters of Evil in different formations again and again, which is great. And again, when you have a team of heroes, you need a team of villains. So that part is good. It was hard to get through some of the artwork and pick it apart and get into those details because the story was so wacky. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. Chic Stone's inking is inconsistent for me throughout the issue. There's some parts I mentioned and showed you where it's very, very light. Other parts are really good. So there's, again, a lack of consistency there. Yeah, it's one of those, other than the fact that it's the Masters of Evil, I would chalk it up as a weird, very early Silver Age silly story. That's me. Of course, I always want to hear your thoughts. How did you feel about this issue? Is it something you read? Is it something you've never seen before? How do you feel about the Masters of Evil? All that kind of stuff. Drop your comments. Let me know what you think. I love to read them, and I do check out every comment that's posted. So please don't be shy in letting me know your thoughts about the Avengers versus the Masters of Evil. And of course, I'll leave you with one last thing. Don't forget to subscribe because we're going to be right back here next week, same time with even more Avengers. Thanks.